my name is Jeannie Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have law professor Robert Steinbuch joining us today to give us an update on two lawsuits that he is currently litigating here in Arkansas. Hi, Robert.
Hey, Jeannie, how are you?
Good, and I want to mention for our viewers who may not be familiar, you are a law professor, but today on Conduit, you're joining us representing your own ideas and beliefs. You are litigating right now two very interesting lawsuits, one in Craighead County and then one that's been moved from Faulkner to Pulaski. But first, I want to talk to you about the one in Craighead County. That's a defamation lawsuit brought by a couple that attended the January 6th rally in D.C. Talk to us about that and catch people up to speed.
Sure. Well, it's a couple of teachers. They're not a couple in that it's two people. And so these two teachers are patriots. They're conservatives. And they were in D.C. on January 6th. And they heard the president speak. And as you know, many people went over to the Capitol, and some people went into the Capitol. And these people went over to the Capitol and didn't go into the Capitol at all. Well, there are a couple of folks up there in Jonesboro County who are leftists, and they didn't like that there are two patriots teaching our kids. They're since retired, incidentally. And so they wrote a series of complaints, including to the Department of Education, saying because these two patriots went to D.C. to express their First Amendment rights, they should be fired. It went on to call them terrorists and criminals and all sorts of bad things, racist. Yeah. You know how the left does it. If you could put an "ist" at the end of a word, they'll call you that word. And so these folks, these leftists, made this complaint about these two patriots. So the first thing my law partner, Chris Corbett, and I did was defend these two patriots in the proceeding by the Department of Education, and the Department of Education correctly dismissed the case entirely. Okay. And then we said, enough is enough. And that's the big sea change, by the way, Jenny. Conservatives are standing up and saying enough is enough. And we sued these two leftists for defamation and related claims. And then we had a hearing. The most common procedure in a defamation case is for the defendant to say, you can't bring this case because there's a First Amendment right, and I'm allowed to express my opinion, and this thing called an anti-slap statute. So there are a number of procedural bars that defendants usually invoke. And these defendants were represented by very able counsel, by the way, someone I know and I like. Yeah. And the court said, no, this is going to go forward because this is a valid complaint. And that's a huge hurdle to overcome. Look, Ginny, we need to demonstrate to the folks out there, those on the far left, hanging off of a limb, that think that they can attack us without consequences. Yeah. And there are legal consequences to be had. And this is exactly the embodiment of that. You have a First Amendment right, but you don't have a First Amendment right to defame someone. You don't have a First Amendment right to interfere with their employment. And so there are limits to what you can do, and this is where we see it. And the court up there, Judge Busby, gave a very thoughtful opinion, 10-page opinion. That's a pretty long opinion for a state court opinion. And it's a very thoughtful opinion about why this case can and will go forward. And so this is a real advance for the cause of justice and for the cause of conservatism. And I think it's, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I just think it's interesting. The left, one of their tactics that they use all of the time, we saw it on just, in a small way whenever legislators are in session. But when they have a bill or something that they do not like, take one of the social bills, they post all of the info about legislators, anyone who supports it, their work address, their phone numbers, their cell phones. And borderline's harassment, but a conservative could never get away with something like that. But I do think it's interesting because there is a double standard, but you're saying now conservatives need to fight back.
That's right. That's right. We need to stand up for our principles. I wrote in my column last week in the Democrat Gazette, in fact, that I think a defining difference between the left and the right is that when we on the right get a Supreme Court opinion with which we disagree, we abide by it. We may seek to overturn it, but we abide by it. Of course, we abided by Roe versus Wade for 50 years. Luckily, we got that overturned. The gay marriage decision came down several years ago, of course, now, and conservatives across this country have been abiding by it and said basically, okay, we understand, and that's the end of that. And so we understand the rule of law. But what does the left do? The recent Supreme Court opinion regarding striking, to be clear, affirmative action in university admissions has finally come down, citing, by the way, to an article that I co-authored. And you already hear the left saying, how can we work around this? Work around it. Why don't you abide by it? And then the other thing, of course, they talk about, which conservatives have never talked about, is, well, if we don't like what the court's doing, we got to pack the court. We'll put more judges on the court.
Right.
That's only been said by leftists, never by conservatives.
Yeah. Before we move on to the second case, tell us what to expect and what's next regarding this lawsuit since that judge made that ruling.
Right. So the next step is discovery, which means we get to take depositions, we get to get records, and presumably they will then make another motion to prevent a trial, even though there's a much lower likelihood of success on that, saying, well, even if the allegations were properly stated, you don't have any evidence to support them. But of course we do. We know for a fact, it is undisputed that the defendants made these improper claims, and therefore now it's up to a jury eventually to decide this case. So this is a big deal.
Yeah. How did it impact their lives? I saw where they were quoted, it was just a nightmare.
It was an absolute nightmare. It was devastating. And frankly, some bureaucrats in the school system were not terribly helpful. They weren't out to get the patriots, but they kind of threw their hands up in the air saying, well, there's only so much I can do, and I'll pass the buck because God forbid I could make an apt decision to say, this is not the kind of stuff that we should be bothering with. You have a First Amendment right to go to DC and listen to the president speak, needless to say. So this is another problem that we see so often, is when conservatives are attacked, instead of having allies, everybody runs for cover.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, we will, of course, keep an eye on that and keep us updated. I want to talk to you about another lawsuit. It was in Faulkner County. It's been moved to Pulaski. It's a lawsuit against Game and Fish Commission. Even though they are a government entity, government building, they are not allowing people to carry inside this building. And so I believe is Chris Corbett a part of this one as well, too?
He was part of the last one. I think he's not on this one. I lose track which case he's co-litigating with me and not. But we act as a team, but sometimes we separated it out just for efficiency purposes.
Right. Well, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. If you read a story in a book like the one I'm going to tell you in a moment, you would say, I understand it's fiction, but this is science fiction. That's how ridiculous it is. And so this story builds the ridiculous upon the absurd. If you go to Game and Fish's gun range in Mayflower and you go into their office, by the way, they call their office a range house. They can call it a banana for as much as I care, but they call it a range house. It's an office, and you know how you know it's an office? Because that's where the people work, and that's where you pay your $2 so that you can shoot, and you're assigned your booth to shoot it. So by any reasonable definition, that's an office. And they have a sign that says nobody's allowed in with a gun into the office, including they say, I don't know if it's on the sign, but they tell you, including those with enhanced concealed carry licenses that they, of course, get from the state. The problem with that is that the enhanced concealed carry license law explicitly allows you to go into any government office. And so what is their defense to this? So then they say, well, even though you're allowed into a government office, a state office in this case, right? And they say the same thing about their offices here in Little Rock and any other office for that matter. So it's not only at their so-called range house. By the way, Ginny, if it's a house, where's the shower?
A range house,
right?
I've never heard anyone call it that.
It's just, it's such make-believe, right?
Right.
And by the way, this is the behavior of the left, right? The left takes words, completely strips them of their meaning, and then tells you, well, you should abide by it. Like, for example, they tell you that hate speech isn't speech. Well, why'd you leave the word speech in the term, right? Couldn't you come up with any other word other than speech if you think it's not actually speech? So they claim it's not an office because they call it a range house. But in any event, they don't let you in any of their offices with a gun, even if you have an enhanced concealed carry license. And the law says you're allowed in any state office. So they say, oh, but we can put up a sign preventing you. Well, no, the provision that allows exemptions for signs is for private people. It says, look, if you have your own place and you want to put up a sign, you can keep people out with enhanced concealed carry licenses. In fact, there's another provision that says, so can UAMS, the state hospital, and certain athletic events do the same. So it specifically tells you which government entities can put up a sign, and Game and Fish ain't among them. But they say we can put up a sign anyway. So they just make it up. And see what the next step is, they would say, and then after you show up and we tell you to leave, and if you don't leave, we're going to what's called trespass you, meaning we tell you to leave, and then we get you arrested for being illegally on the premises. So this is their backdoor, ridiculous attempt around the clear dictates of the law. And part of their argument is, we don't have to obey the law. No.
Why does it even matter to get help? Like, why does it even matter to Game and Fish? Why do they want to carry this out so far to not follow the law?
It's a great question, Ginny. And I've been pondering that. Austin Booth is the head of Game and Fish. His picture on Facebook, I think, is him in a military uniform from the Marines. Why does a Marine want to keep guns out of the office at the gun range?
Yeah.
By the way,
what about their employees?
They all carry guns inside the building. So
inside
all their
the gun house, inside the range house,
inside the range house, right? Maybe they take them off when they take their non-existent shower in the non-existent shower facilities.
Right.
I don't know, but they're all carrying guns. But Marine Austin Booth and his minions are telling you, you can't carry the gun. By the way, it also happens to include your rifle. And so they tell you, leave it out front on the stoop. That's real safe. Leave your gun out front of the office on the stoop, because we tell you can't carry the gun inside the building. But I'm not talking about long arms, rifles. I'm talking about enhanced concealed carry licenses.
Yeah.
People with a physical license that says they're allowed to carry in state buildings. One of their claims, the Constitution puts us above state law. That's one of their claims. You didn't know, Ginny, that, those Saturday morning cartoons that tell you there are 3 branches of government? Not in Arkansas. According to Austin Booth and his cronies, there are 4 branches of government. So we got to change that cartoon for Arkansas.
Well, also, did I not see, I believe I did recently, that Game and Fish also just increased their pay raises to become nationally competitive, I believe. Is that?
They gave the most pay raises over $10,000, and they gave several people pay raises of $30,000. Who are they competing with, by the way? Are there other Game and Fish entities inside the state that they're competing with? Are other states Game and Fish entities trying to lure away our people? As we seek to rein in spending of government, they're giving $30,000 pay raises?
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable to you?
I think some would say no.
Yeah.
So talk to us, why was this case moved from Faulkner to Pulaski?
That's a great question. And let me tell you about the activities that took place there demonstrate the absurdity. They have an attorney, James Goodhart. So James Goodhart files a motion in Faulkner County, and he says this case was filed in the wrong county, should have been filed in Pulaski County. But instead of saying transfer it to Pulaski County, he says dismiss it. Of course, he says dismiss it because he doesn't want to actually litigate the merits of this case. He's looking for every procedural hurdle. So we go to court in Faulkner County, and I said, well, here's why we filed in Faulkner, but I don't have a strong sort of urgency that it needs to be in Faulkner. We believed it was appropriate to file in Faulkner. That's the only reason we filed it in Faulkner. But I pointed out to the court that if the court agrees with his argument, that James Goodhart's argument, that the proper or better venue, whichever one, is in Pulaski County, then the resolution is not to dismiss it. That's kind of absurd. I mean, if your argument is there are two counties, one is the right one and one is the wrong one, then the resolution is not that there is no lawsuit.
Throw it out.
Throw it out. Where'd that come from? There's like a baseball bat to the back of the head. Where did that come from? It's you send it back to Pulaski. So I just pointed out that the illogical claim that James Goodhart was making. So the court said, well, I do think it's better to go for this case to go in Pulaski County. But obviously, if that's the case, I'm going to transfer it to Pulaski County. I'm not going to dismiss the case. It's kind of, this is now me saying it, but it's kind of silly to even suggest that it should be dismissed. But this is the kind of overreaching that we've seen from Game and Fish from the very get-go. And so it gets sent over to Pulaski County, and the clerk contacts James Goodhart, not me at all, calls him. Of course, the number that apparently he provided somewhere wasn't valid. So then they email him and said, well, you got to pay $50 and fill out this piece of paper. So then he copies me in on the email and says, I think Steinbuch's got to pay it because he's the one that suggested that it should be transferred. I didn't suggest it should be transferred. I suggested that if venue is improper, the resolution is transfer. He's the one that made the motion. I told the court repeatedly, I think Faulkner County is fine. But he starts arguing with the clerk. Now, the clerk doesn't hear arguments. It's a clerk. They do a lot of good work, but they don't hear arguments.
Right.
So I contacted the court in Faulkner County, and it's still pending. And I told them I want to make a motion in Faulkner County that Goodhart needs to pay the bill because, according to the clerk in Pulaski County, they send the bill to the person that drafted the motion. Well, Goodhart was the one tasked with drafting the motion, not me, not me. But he's decided that he knows better than the clerk. He knows better than the court. He knows better than the legislature. He knows better than the people of Arkansas. He knows better than everyone. I think that behavior is really problematic. So that's where we are. This is the kind of shenanigans that we're seeing every day.
The question that I have as you're explaining all of this is a government entity. There are specific rules that they have to follow because of that. And it seems such a waste of resources for this to be the hill that Game and Fish wants to die on, to waste resources, to be in court. Follow the law. That could the AG step in at any point and kind of squash this?
Yeah. I mean, one way is for someone to make a request of the Attorney General for an opinion on what's going on here. But I don't see why the Attorney General couldn't also just voice his opinion of being aware of what's going on. This is a litigation against the state, after all, and he can voice his opinion and say, look, this is pretty clear cut. And we have an Attorney General opinion from Leslie Rutledge already, which was very good opinion from Leslie, saying that essentially we're right, that you can carry a gun in a government facility, a state facility, a state office, if you have a concealed carry license and they can't stop you with a sign and they can't try to trespass you. And so we have one good attorney general opinion from the last attorney general. And that, you know, you raise a wonderful point. I wouldn't mind seeing a similar attorney general, maybe digging in even a little deeper from the current attorney general, from Tim Griffin, of course. So I think that's a wonderful suggestion. But here's also another suggestion. I think Austin Booth needs to get his operation under control because he's got a bunch of bureaucrats running the ship. And this guy is, I believe, a Marine. He needs to take leadership of this place because so far he has not. And he needs to say the buck stops with him and that he supports the Second Amendment rights of Arkansans. He supports the statutory rights of enhanced concealed carry licensees. And he needs to straighten out this mess today. You're a Marine. Get it done, Austin.
Robert, we always enjoy having you on Conduit. Thanks for keeping us up to date and filling in the details on these two lawsuits. Please come back on again soon.
You know I will.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.